Hello, everyone.
Hi guys,
Welcome once again to another session of Love Wednesday.
where it's all about love.
Yeah, we started a series some weeks ago on raising godly children, and we know that is one of our purposes in marriage. And last week we looked at punitive discipline. This week we'd like to conclude our series. So, kick us off.
Yeah, so this week as we conclude, we wanted to just bring out the issue that parents should avoid provoking their children to anger.
Yeah.
Now, as we consider discipline, it's very important to know that parents should not discipline children in a way that provokes them to rebellion.
Yeah.
Now, Colossians 3:21 says,
Mm.
Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will be discouraged.
Mm.
In this context, Paul spoke to fathers and commanded them not to embitter their children, lest they become discouraged or lose heart. Now, this word embitter is such a powerful word. It's such a powerful word because the way we discipline our children kind of sets the tone in which they view us as parents.
Yeah. Not even just parents, the world. And if we are not careful, your child can end up with a deep-rooted anger. A very deep-rooted anger that then leads them towards rebellion to God, rebellion to all forms of authority. And it's an anger that affects them and affects their character for the rest of your life, for their lives. So we need to be mindful not to do that, not to lead them to that point of anger.
Guys, you've heard of that saying that daddy issues.
Now, which we
now
brush
this
off.
is where this is where it starts.
Exactly.
This is where it starts.
That's where it starts. And a lot of time that kind of anger, by the way, it's usually parental.
Yeah, it's
parental anger. It's usually, like you say, daddy issues or mommy issues. It's just the way you were disciplined or the way you are brought up. And it's not just that you're upset, but it is something that is at the very core of you.
Yeah. So, how do parents embitter their children? And it happens in many ways. One, parents embitter their children by not disciplining them. Now, when you do not discipline your children, they get to do whatever they want.
Yeah, they become spoiled.
Yeah.
Spoiled, thankless, and bitter. And you know, children who are spoiled are the worst to deal with, because then they go to adults who are used to having their way.
Yeah, they get everything they want.
Yes, they have this expectation that they should get what they want.
Yeah, the world owes them
a favor. And when things don't go their way, then they just become nasty people. So we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. Now we've seen that, and it's really, really terrible. You get children who are entitled, and getting rid of that is extremely, extremely hard. And sadly, in the later years,
it's almost impossible, because that foolishness, you didn't drive it out. The last time we looked at, I think it was Proverbs 22:15, which says, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the road of discipline will drive it far from him." It's because you didn't drive out that foolishness as a child. And there's a reason why Proverbs, Solomon says that in the heart of a child, not the heart of an adult. That foolishness is in the heart of a child. If you don't drive it out when they are kids, you've handed the world an interesting character.
And the only thing that will drive it out when they're adults is hardships.
Exactly. Prison.
Prison and all those things. Another thing is parents embitter their children by abusing them or giving them improper discipline. Now, abuse, either physically or verbally, sows seeds of anger or hatred in children. Now, like we mentioned last week, when you're disciplining your children, do not discipline with anger.
Yeah.
Because in most cases, the child looks at you in a different light, and they look at themselves as a problem, and yet that is not what it is.
Yeah, and they begin to think that it's okay. It's okay to behave a certain way. If you're those parents, who lash out in anger and shout, then the child thinks that it's okay to shout. That's how people behave. If let's say your beating just goes randomly, you're just beating up a person, they think it is okay to behave like that, and that is the behavior that they will model as adults. Because they say most people who are abusers were raised up in abusive homes.
Yeah,
that is it.
Yeah, that's so true. Another way that parents embitter children is by never encouraging them and showing them affection. Now you've heard of children who were never encouraged. They have so many issues. They have so many self-esteem issues. They never reach their potential.
Yeah, I think an example is given of Martin Luther King. His father was such a disciplinarian that Martin Luther had a problem with saying the Lord's Prayer. He couldn't even say Our Father who art in heaven, because for him the word father, the connotation, it was always linked to severe discipline, to the point that he said that in as much as the Bible says spare the rod and spoil the child, always have an apple nearby for when the kid needs some encouraging. So you need to balance. You cannot be that person where for you every time it's a punitive all the time. Where's the space for encouraging?
And not just encouraging, also reward. We've seen parents who are so used to disciplining their children, but do not even reward them.
Exactly, that when a child does something that is nice, they don't even acknowledge. They don't even acknowledge it. And yet children need that. Children need that encouragement. They thrive for it, and it's important to give it to them at those ages when they need it.
And the funny thing is, when you do not reward them, they will seek for that validation.
Exactly. They will grow up into people who seek for validation. We've seen adults like that. They need someone to always validate them, and it leads them down a very dangerous path.
Leads to bad relationships and other things.
Parents also embitter by neglecting children. When you neglect your children, that's what happens. Like you ignore them. Children who are ignored actually turn into bitter people. That's what we don't understand. And that bitterness is sown when they are children, where you have so much time for everything else except your child, and they feel like they are a thing to be passed on, passed on to the maid, passed on to the teacher, passed on to the coach, passed on to the pastor. It's like as if for you never have time for them. And that is something that we need to think seriously about, because children don't forget. Someone always look back in their childhood, even when they're adults, and they'll be like,
my parents were never there.
They were never there. And this becomes so evident in the teenagers, because if you didn't give your child time when they're teenagers, when you should actually be having a lot of influence on their character, you won't be able to, because they don't know how to spend time with you, because you were never there.
And we've seen it, we've experienced it, where you just don't know how to spend time with your child.
Yeah, you don't. Even you don't know how to spend time with your parents. When now they call you just feel strange. Half the time when they call you, you're like, what have I done? Your mind instantly goes to what have I done.
And we talked about how the relationship between God and us also determines the relationship between us and our children. So if we've known God to be a loving Father, let our children know that of us.
Exactly.
That such that when we call them, they know that it may not just be discipline, it may be something else. It may be just wanting to spend time with them. Another way in which parents embitter children is by showing favoritism to other siblings. Now, this has so many repercussions. It can lead to one sibling being bitter with another. It can lead to one child withdrawing because you're spending so much time with another sibling. You're giving them more,
and you're comparing them. And that's the worst thing to do as a parent, to start comparing your children to one another. I think that the story in the Bible that most shows the impact of favoritism is the story of Jacob and his sons. Jacob favored Joseph It is Joseph whom he gave the coat of many colors. And because he favored him over the rest of his siblings, you see how his siblings...
Yeah, they were extremely bitter. And I personally think it could have turned out differently.
Yeah, it would have if he loved his children equally. But for Jacob, it started all the way from the mothers of the kids.
Yeah.
His love between Leah and Rachel. Then now the sons, this one felt that he loved this one more. So they became bitter towards their brother, to the point of selling their own flesh and blood to slavery. So that is the extreme that favoritism can cause. So we need to be mindful of that we don't cause a rift between our children, because when you're siblings, you have each other. Now, if you, the parent, cause a rift between their siblings, you're doing them a very serious disservice.
Yeah. Another way in which parents should raise godly children, parents must know their children.
Yes.
Now, God knows us. God knows us as His children.
He does.
The word says that before we were in our mother's womb,
He knew us.
He knew us.
Yeah, that's Jeremiah.
So He knew everything about us. So that means even how He deals with us is special, is intimate. Now, in the same way, we should be able to know our children.
Yes.
We should be able to know what triggers them. We should be able to know what they like. We should be able to know every single thing about them. And in doing that, we know the steps to take, in which to discipline them, in which to encourage them, in which to raise them properly.
In the way they should go. I think it's Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Yeah, so it's about training up a child in his way, and we need to be mindful about that God has created each of our children different, with their own path.
Yeah. Now, one problem with us parents, sometimes we have our own dreams.
And you want to live your dreams through your
And
kids.
you want to live your dreams through your children, because you are not able to achieve some of your dreams.
Exactly.
So you find yourself trying to mold your kids into a certain path, and yet that is not there.
Yes, and you forget that you're but a steward. That's something we should always remember. You're just a steward. And if you're a steward, you should ask God to show you who He has called this child to be. Because in training up a child, you don't just training, there's direction in training. It's not random. Yeah? And for you to be intentional about training your child, you need to know who they are and who God has called them to be. You need to be able to discern their strengths, their weaknesses, their giftings. Yeah? And you need to know your child that intimately, that this is what they're good at, this is not what they're good at, this is what they gravitate towards too, so that you can call out the greatness in them, because that's what God has called us to do. You're just stewarding this child. They are God's first. Yeah? And that is the ultimate mandate of each of us whom God has called as parents. That is the biggest thing. It's not even the work that you do, all these things you do outside. What is the point of having achieved so much in the world? Yeah? And yet your child, the one thing that God gave you to nurture, you leave to fall by the wayside. You have not called out that greatness. So know your child. Know precisely who they are. The way God knows you, the way He knew you when He formed you in your mother's womb. Know them. Yeah? Know them, and then call out that greatness, and then train them in the direction of the knowledge that God has given you of them.
So that was it about raising godly children. We really enjoyed these sessions, because it's very, very dear to us, and I think it's also very dear to the kingdom of God. Because children are but an arrow, so they set direction for so many things. And we thank you for listening. We thank you for being a part of us this Wednesday. Wherever you are, if you haven't given your life to Christ, just say this simple prayer. Lord, thank you for dying for me on the cross. Thank you for all that you've done for me. Today I choose to accept you as my Lord and Savior. And may you just take hold of me. I surrender myself to you. May you just take every part of me and mold me to who you want me to be. Now, if you've said that prayer, know that you're a child of God by faith, and know that all the promises that are put to a child of God are put to you as well. So just as we say in Rooted Community Church, as He is, so are we in this.
Christ Jesus, you are the righteousness of God.
Yes. Thank you. And see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.